The amount of money you actually put away is the number one determinant of the amount of money that you end up with when you are retired. And this is something that you can 100% control. Now, how can you control this? Obviously, you only can control your income so much, right? You can only have so much control over your income, but how can you control the amount of money you end up putting away of that income? Well, obviously, live below your means. You can live as far below your means as you want to, and any extra money that you have, you can save and invest that money for the future. And this is what's really going to get you home. If you're worried about those things you can't control, like the market, or you're worried about the effects of inflation over the long term, or if you're worried about Social Security not being there, then actually saving more, changing your savings amount over time is what can get you to a strong retirement, even in lieu of those things going negatively. So the amount of money that you save is definitely going to be a direct correlation with the amount of money you end up having in retirement. Now, it can be extremely positive because, hey, save more, save more, save more, you'll end up with more. But it can also be extremely negative because if you save less, you will also end up with less. So you have to make sure that if you want to have any type of comfortable retirement over the long term, it is not a good plan to rely on the government and Social Security and all of the factors that you cannot control. You need to take things into your own hands that you actually can take into your own hands. And one of those things is the amount of money that you save out of your check every single month. Now, what else can impact our retirement that we can definitely control? Something else that we can definitely control is our spending. And maybe even more so than our saving, because our saving is also dependent on our income, which we have limited control over, even though we have some control over what our income is. Your spending is 100% controllable, right? You can control the amount of money that leaves your hand or your wallet and goes into somebody else's. You can control that. And not only do you need to control it when you are planning to retire, not only do you need to control it when it is time to retire, you need to control it while you are leading up to retirement. Why? Because if you are overspending now when you are needing to save money and invest money for your future, then you are going to save and invest less for your future. And that is not what we want. We do not want to be saving and investing less for our future because we are too big of spenders today. And in the same way, if we get in this habit of just spending and being exorbitant spenders today, well, we'll be exorbitant spenders in retirement, and we obviously do not want that. But if you want to know something that is absolutely going to determine the amount of money that you end up with in your retirement accounts, the amount of money that you spend today will definitely do so. Because if you are not somebody who is willing to forego consumption and invest your money and save your money for the future, then a world of hurt may be waiting for you at retirement, and you may not end up with the amount of money that you thought you would end up with. And so let's make sure that that's not the case. Let's definitely control our spending, have a budget, right? I preach budgeting. You need to budget. Let's make sure that we're not going into debt and spending money on things that we don't need to spend money on just because we want status symbols like cars or a house you can't afford, or you're buying things on credit cards like clothes and electronics or whatever it may be. Let's not do that, and let's use our money for better means. Let's use our money in order to prepare ourselves for the future in the best way that we can. Now, the third thing that we can control is something that I really want to key in on. The third thing that we can control that is going to impact the amount of money that we end up with at retirement is when we start saving for retirement. I mean, you may be sitting here at 22, 23, 4, 5, 30, 35 and saying, I have time. I don't need to save money for retirement today. I don't need to be opening retirement accounts. I'm nowhere near retirement. Why in the world would I do that? Because time is your friend if you allow it to be. And if you don't allow it to be, it will 100% become your enemy. Because if you want to retire at a certain time, you have to do the math, understand the time value of money, understand compounding money over time, and how much money you need to save between now and then. And the earlier you start, the easier it is to get to that place. So I want to give you a few examples of how that exactly works out. if you make 10% per year for 40 years and you want to have $1 million saved, then you're going to need to save $158.13 per month over 40 years to get to that point. And so that is, not a ton of money every month. But let's say you waited 20 years. So you invested for half the amount of time, right? So how much money do you think you would need to invest monthly to get to the $1 million then, making the same return? Would you think maybe, double, twice as much? No. Not even close to twice as much. Way, way more than twice as much. Almost 10 times as much money. You would need to invest $1,316.88 per month just to get to that $1 million mark if you started 20 years later and only invested for 20 years. And that's very, very substantial. So when you start is really going to have an impact on how much money you end up with, especially if you're investing the same amount as the person who has been investing for a long period of time. You have to start early. You have to start earlier in order to get to where you want to be. Obviously, there are some milestones that you need to hit. You need to get out of debt. You need to have an emergency fund. But the faster you can do that, you immediately need to get in the business of investing for your future because it is going to make a difference. And the thing is, you can absolutely control that. When you're young and don't have much money, anything that you can, $50, $100 a month, whatever it may be, set it aside, keep investing it, put it away. If you work for a company that has a match, that's the third part of the financial action plan. Actually take advantage of the company match in the 401k and get that free money and start compounding money for yourself, for your future. You will not regret it because again, you will regret having too small of a nest egg, but you will not regret having too large of one. Now, the last factor that could impact our retirement account amounts that is in our control that we're going to talk about today is your portfolio. Your portfolio of investments is within your control. What you choose to do with your investments is within your control. Good or bad, it is 100% within your control. And we talked a little bit yesterday about being too equity light, right? Because people are living a long time. And so maybe taking a little more risk for a little more time may be a better idea for most individuals. And that may be part of this. And, maybe you were not aggressive enough, right? And so that doesn't get you to the amount of money that you want to get to. You end up coming up short. Or let's say you were too aggressive and you were investing in single stocks that you knew nothing about and penny stocks and all these types of things. And maybe you really lost your head on those types of things. There is definitely a balance. There's definitely a balance to risk and return. And we've talked about this before, but there is that direct correlation between risk and return. So you need to pay attention to your portfolio. You need to pay attention to the types of things you're invested in and whether or not they meet your risk tolerance, meaning they are suitable for you, and whether or not they're going to provide or have historically provided the long-term returns that you are looking for in your retirement account. And then along with just what you're invested in, you also need to pay attention to what the fees are in your portfolio, right? What are your expense ratios, 12B1 fees, any types of loads that you may have on mutual funds. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to if you're using an advisor, what are the advisory fees? And because that's going to impact your returns because that is money that they are taking from you over time. And we want to make sure that they take as little money from us over time as possible. And then you also need to pay attention to your taxes because if you end up paying large amounts in taxes because maybe you are trading in a brokerage account or whatever it may be, which I don't necessarily condone, but let's say you did something like that. If you did those types of things, then you could have tax costs that could really eat into the amount of money that you get to keep over time. Because ultimately what we're trying to do here with your portfolio is to gain and keep as much money over time as we can. And the truth of it all is it's not difficult to gain an adequate amount of money because you can do that, just based on basic index funds, mutual funds, things like that. It's most difficult to keep it because you have to pay attention to all those exogenous factors such as fees and costs and taxes and all of those different types of things. So this is within our control. This is going to impact the amount of money that we end up with at retirement. And it's going to impact how we can, end up taking money off of our retirement accounts in retirement and the amount of withdrawal rate that we can actually use realistically when taking money off of our retirement accounts as well.